Hi guys, Celestia here. In the last part of the story of Fig, Cecilia told the clan some things that they probably didn't want to hear. Most of them probably didn't believe her, and both of them had both she and Falar, both had a bit of a temper tantrum. So we're going to continue with Falar telling his clan how disgusted he is with them. Falar just stands there for a few moments, just looking out at his people. Whether he was actually seeing them, nobody would know but him. As he comes back to himself, he realizes that he's being stared at. He says, "I'm sorry, I went away." He said, "I'm tired." He said, "So much has happened this past month that I'm afraid it's beginning to catch up with me." As he says that, he sways slightly on his feet, and his mate Glynith comes over to him, puts her arm around him, and she says, "That's enough." She says, "That's enough, you're going home." He says, "Glynith," she says, "No, Falar." She says, "You like to boss people around when it suits you. Now it's my turn. You're going home." He says, "I need to do something first." She said, "Nothing that's important. You need to go home and you need to rest. That's it." Eldred comes over and says, "Falar, please. You need to rest or you're going to make yourself sick, and then what good are you going to be to the clan? Anything that you need to do can wait." He says, "Very well." So Glynn steps forward, and he's rather shocked because this is not like his mate. His mate is usually quite happy being in the background. She's not a pushover or anything like that. She just doesn't feel the need to be in the forefront. It's her husband's job. She said, "My husband needs to rest." This has all been too much for him. She said, "As my daughter Fig is a sensitive, she gets it from her father and I. However, Falar's walls are much better at keeping out random thoughts than mine, but now that he is so tired, bone weary, I'm sure, those walls are not doing their jobs. So I am calling this meeting to a close. You can all go home. Or you can stay here and mingle or do whatever you want, but this meeting is over. My mate is going home. I'm going to feed him. I'm going to get him some tea or some wine, and then I'm going to tuck him into bed so he can rest. And if you all don't have the decency to allow that to happen, then shame on you." Meeting adjourned. She goes back to Falar. She looks at Rowan and Mead. She says, "Please take Cecilia home. She's had a rough day too." Galan says, I'm going to escort them." She says, "A good idea." She says, "Are you armed?" He said, "Oh, yes." He said, "I may not be like Eldred. I may not never miss, but I'm a pretty damn good shot." She says, very well. Fig says, Father, come on, let's go home. As they're getting ready to leave, Fig hears in her head, sorry, had a little frog in my throat. Ribbit, ribbit. Fig hears in her head, I don't want to disturb your father with this, so I'll tell you. She says, what is it, Ebony? He said, the tent is there. It has been set up and furnished. It's ready for inspection anytime. She says, yes, thank you. Alwyn comes over and says, Glynith, just before you leave, would you come to my home tomorrow so that we can start on the amulets? She said, yes, of course I will. Of course. She said, I'll have everything ready. She says, very well. Owen goes over to Ryo and she says, what are we going to do with McCandless's house? He said, I don't know. I don't think Falar has thought that far ahead. He says, why? Well, she said, I had a thought. She said, as you know, I have so many books. They're on every surface in my house. I have to move them to eat. I even have them at the foot of my bed. Oh, yes. Oh, Owen, that's a very good idea. He says, Galan. Oh, Galan's not here. Fig, Eldred. They had been chatting, the two of them. Eldred comes over and he says, what's up? What's wrong? He says, nothing. Owen just asked what we were going to do with McCandless's house. He says, well, McCandless's house, the property's forfeit. He's dead. Anybody who wants it can claim it, according to Elven law. Isn't that right, Owen? She said, yes, but... He says, but... She said, well, I'd like to put in a claim on it. She said, He says, you feel badly. You feel like some kind of greedy person. She said, but she said, I don't want the house for me. She said, I want it for my books. Anybody's books. She says, Vic, you know that I've been keeping clan history. She said, just like you're doing research on animal behavior. Both Ryo and Eldred look at her. She says, what? She says, yeah. Eldred said, isn't that odd? So Ryo says, Glynith, oh, and let's go over here and we'll talk about this. He says, I think you definitely should put in a formal claim. Definitely. Fig says, why is that strange? He said, because I've been doing research as well. She said, you've been doing research. Like what? Botany. He said, we live in a forest. In a magical place. He said, all of the plants and the trees and all of those things just fascinate me. He said, I sat one day watching the moonflowers come up in the evening. He said, I've watched the morning glories open. He said, I have books and books and books filled with drawings that I've made of different flowers and how long the blooms last, and I don't know, just that type of soil and the area of the forest. And she's just standing there staring at him, slack-jawed. He says, what? She says, aren't you marvelous? Thank you. She says, don't you see? She says, this is something that we can do together. Yes. He said, you can track the animals where they go. And then we can also track what plants they stay away from and what plants they eat. Because I'm sure that the plants that they stay away from must have some horrible properties to them. And that would be good for the clan to know, wouldn't it? She says, exactly. She said, this is something we're going to be able to do from now until whenever. The two of us. He said, but it's not just the two of us. She says, what do you mean? She said, he says, there's a whole group of people that are interested in this stuff. He says, I meet them in the woods all the time. He said, we share notes, we share drawings, we learn from each other. She said, we need to organize these people. She said, we need to organize them. She said, we need to discuss this with my father. He said, no, not until he's rested. She said, well, no, of course not. Duh. No, you know what, Eldred, I thought we would, go running after him right now and tell him so that he has one more thing to think about. Seriously. I'm his daughter. You're going to be family as well. As if the two of us would barge in at a time where he should be resting. Buy a brain. He said, I don't want to buy a brain. They're too expensive. He said, and if you get one that's half off, he said, well, it's no good for anybody. She says, was that a joke? He said, no, I'm being serious. He said, would you want to buy a brain that was half off? He said, I'd like my brain, thank you. He said, it may not be perfect. He said, but it certainly led me to you. She says, oh. Thank you. She said, now, was it your brain or your heart? She said, both. He said, my heart may have led me to you, but my brain was certainly the thing that said, yes, you need this woman in your life. No matter what. Fig, if there had been other men that were interested in you, I would have fought for you. He said, I would have somehow made all the other men that were interested in you look like nothing. That you would have chosen me. She said, and how exactly would you have done that? He says, I don't know, I didn't have to. She says, you can be such a brat. He says, but you love me anyway. She says, that's not funny, Eldred. He said, yes, it is, because you're trying not to smile, I can tell. She says, oh, damn you. He says, you better be careful. He says, or I'll tickle you. She says, you wouldn't dare. He said, oh, but I would. He said, because I have it on very good authority that you're extremely ticklish. She said, who told you that? He says, I'm not giving up my sources. Just know that after you and I are mated, if I have to tickle you to keep you in line, I will. She said, well, I also happen to know that you don't like your feet being touched. What? I don't know what you're talking about. She said, oh, yes. She said, I heard it from one of the healers. They were talking about you when you had to go and have your foot be looked at after you stepped on something in the forest. They told you this? She said, no. I eavesdropped. I heard the name Eldred, and I eavesdropped. Peg! Is that any way for the daughter of the chief to behave? And she said, when I want information, yes. She said, so is it true or not? In case I'm not telling. She said, I have ways of finding out, you know. I can go and ask Meek. It's not appropriate for a healer to give out personal information about a patient. She said, Meek and I are friends. She said, I can make her let it slip. I can get her to let it slip. It was fine. I don't like having my feet touched. There, are you happy? She said, do you walk barefoot? He said, no. He said, well, if I'm swimming, maybe. He said, but I don't like slimy stuff on my feet. I don't like feeling the rocks and stuff on my feet when they're bare feet. She says, big bad Eldred who can never miss a target with a weapon. She said, what other things am I going to learn about you? He says, the only thing that you need to learn about me. She leans forward a little bit. He says, is how much I love you. He said, and I'm going to show you every day how much I adore you. Oh, she says, so. She said, you're trying to change the subject by being romantic. Yeah. She said, I'm going to add that to my checklist. He says, aren't you ever romantic? Fig. Oh, she said, I don't have to be. You're romantic enough for both of us. He says, that will never do, you see. He said, I happen to know that you're very romantic. So one day I saw you in the forest and you were writing a romantical poem. A romantic poem, not romantical. He says romantical isn't even a word. A romantic poem? I don't know what you're talking about now. He says, really? He said, I'm sure if I looked in one of the, let me see, I think it was the Green Journal. You were writing it in there. She says, you're not to touch my journals, Eldred. She says, they have private thoughts in them. He says, very well. He says, then we will leave the discussion of my feet out of it. He said, or I will read your journals. She says, you wouldn't. Well, he said, if you don't leave me any choice, I will. She says, you're such a brat. Shadow comes over to Fig and brushes his head up against her, and she says, yes, Shadow. He says, I thought you might want to know that those 3 men left together. And they all went to the tallest man's house. And they're there now. He says, I don't like the energy coming from that place. She says, thank you, Shadow. She says, I think perhaps it might be time to do some eavesdropping. Are you up for it, Eldred? He said, I'll stand guard. He said, I'm not. My hearing is good, but not nearly as good as yours. He says, I swear you are part animal, which is fine. She said, lead the way, Shadow. He says, we need to tell someone official. She said, how much more official do you want than the daughter of the chief? He said, elders. Fig, you need people to corroborate what you're hearing. Elders. She says, very well. And that's where we're going to leave this part of the story. Eldred and Fig, how cute are they? Not wanting your feet to be touched. I know people like that. And yet then there are other people who have feet, the soles of their feet are like cast iron. And they really couldn't care. Like my granddaughter. My granddaughter hates wearing shoes. Hates it. But I digress. So my friends, until we get together for the next part of the story of Fig, to all of my subscribers, thank you. Thank you for thinking that the content on my channel is worth your time. I appreciate it more than I can say. And remember, never, never let anyone dull your sparkle. And know that I love you all. Mwah! Till we see each other again, my friends. Bye-bye.